The alarm went off at 5:14 a.m., same as always. Ethan Cole didn't need it anymore. He'd been awake since 4:30, lying on his side of the bed, his side, because he still slept on the left, still left the right untouched, pillow unindented, blanket smooth, staring at the ceiling, the way a man stares when he's already tired of the dark and not yet ready for the light. He got up. He made coffee. He stood at the kitchen window and watched the snow come down over Andersonville. Chicago in February was the kind of cold that didn't ask permission. It pushed through weather stripping and window seams and settled into rooms like an uninvited guest who knew they'd be tolerated. Ethan didn't mind it. The cold was honest. It didn't ask how you were doing. It didn't tell you time heals everything. It just pressed against the glass and let you press back. He was 37 years old. He had a son who would turn 9 in April. He had a job he was good at and a mortgage he was managing, and a life that, from the outside, probably looked like something resembling okay. From the inside, it was a careful arrangement, a series of tasks strung together to fill the hours. Lily had been gone for 3 years, 2 months, and he stopped counting the days sometime around month 18. He'd told himself that was progress. She'd been 34, no warning. Her heart, the cardiologist explained afterward, had an electrical anomaly that most people live with their whole lives without incident. Lily Cole had not been most people. She'd been making Noah's lunch on a Tuesday morning when it happened. Ethan had been 2 miles away at Station 12, midway through a shift. By the time he got to the hospital, she was already gone. 3 years. He poured the coffee. He checked Noah's bag by the door, homework folder, library book, the Spider-Man thermos that Noah had refused to retire despite its cracked lid. He ran through the morning the way he always did. Methodically, quietly, one foot after the other. That was how you did it. You just kept going. His colleagues at Station 12 were good men and women who had stopped asking directly and started asking sideways. His captain, Dennis Hargrove, had taken to mentioning unmarried female relatives with the subtlety of a smoke alarm. His partner, a barrel-chested man named Walt Fredericks, had tried a more blunt approach approximately 14 months ago. "There's this woman in my building. Eth, I swear she'd be good for you." And Ethan had deflected so cleanly that Walt had dropped it and never brought it up again. Lily's parents, Gerald and Patricia Sinclair, called every Sunday. They lived 40 minutes north, in Evanston, and they took Noah every other weekend. They were careful people. They didn't push. But every few months, Patricia would say something quietly devastating, like, "Lily always said she'd haunt you if you didn't live your life, Ethan." I think she meant it. He appreciated them. He didn't know what to do with them. The thing no one told you about grief, or maybe they told you and you couldn't hear it until you were inside it, was that it didn't get smaller. It just got more familiar. You learned to move around it the way you learn to move around furniture in the dark. You stopped stubbing your toes quite as often. But the furniture was still there. Noah was the one who broke him. It happened on a Sunday evening in January, 2 weeks before any of this began. They were sitting on the couch watching something with animated dogs saving something, and Noah, without looking up from the screen, said, "Dad, how come you never go on dates?" Ethan blinked. "What?" "Marcus's dad goes on dates," he told Marcus, "and Tyler's dad got married again." "Oh." Noah finally looked up. He had Lily's eyes, that particular shade of gray-green that shifted depending on the light. "Don't you want to?" Ethan was quiet for a moment. "I don't know, bud." Noah considered this with the seriousness of someone who had given it real thought. "Mom would want you to be happy. She was always trying to make people happy." He didn't answer. He pressed his knuckles to his mouth and stared at the television and thought, 8 years old. My son is 8 years old, and he's already braver than I am. The account took him 3 evenings to set up. He used an old photo himself at a company softball game, 2 summers before the worst summer, clean-shaven and slightly sunburned and smiling at something off camera. He called himself E. He wasn't ready to be Ethan Cole, widower, firefighter, man who sleeps on the left side of the bed still. He was ready to be E, maybe. Her name on the app was Aria. Her profile photo showed a woman in a green coat, face turned slightly toward the lake, laughing at something. You couldn't see her clearly. He hadn't cared. He'd been more interested in what she wrote. Back in Chicago, after 4 years away, relearning the city, looking for honest conversation, not performance. They matched on a Wednesday. The first message she sent was, "Do you actually like coffee? Or did you just list it because everyone lists it?" He'd laughed, actually laughed, out loud, alone in his kitchen at 11 p.m., and typed back, "I drink it out of necessity. I've been lying to myself for years." 5 days of messages, easy ones. The kind that didn't require you to perform or prove anything. She had a dry humor and a habit of asking follow-up questions, and twice she called him out when he was being evasive in a way that felt less like pressure and more like she actually wanted to know. He asked to meet her on a Thursday. He hadn't planned to. Noah had just gone to sleep and the house was quiet, and he was sitting in the kitchen rereading their conversation and thinking, "This person is making me feel something," and the thought was terrifying enough that he decided to move before he could talk himself out of it. She said yes quickly. Then, "I feel like I should warn you. I'm a little nervous." He typed, "So am I. First time doing this." A pause. Then, "Me too." Same reason? He didn't answer that directly, but somehow, neither of them logged off for another hour. They agreed on Saturday. 7 p.m. A cafe he knew in Lincoln Square, small, warm. The kind of place with mismatched chairs and fogged windows, and a chalkboard menu that nobody changed. He almost canceled Friday morning. He almost canceled Saturday afternoon. He went. The snow started around 4 and didn't stop. By the time Ethan parked and walked the half-block to the cafe, it was falling steadily, not the dramatic curtain of white kind, but the quiet, persistent kind that accumulates without announcing itself. The street lamps were already haloed. The sidewalk made soft sounds under his boots. He was 20 minutes early. He ordered a coffee he didn't need and chose a table in the corner, near the window but not directly against it, where he could see the door. Old habit. Firefighters and cops both did it. He'd noticed always knowing where the exits were, always facing the room. The cafe was warm in a way that felt deliberate. String lights behind the counter, the smell of something baking, a couple at the table nearest the door, sharing a pastry and speaking quietly, not looking at their phones. 2 women by the wall with their coats still on, deep in conversation. Normal. Everything was normal. Ethan wrapped both hands around his mug and tried to remember how to do this. He'd been on exactly 1 date since Lily. 6 months ago. A woman named Deirdre, who worked in hospital administration and had been widowed herself 18 months prior. They'd met through a grief support group he'd attended twice, and then quietly stopped attending. Coffee, 1 hour. Pleasant enough, mutual decision to leave it at that. He hadn't felt anything except mild relief when it was over. This was different. He didn't know why it was different. Maybe it was the 5 days of messages. Maybe it was the follow-up questions. Maybe it was that he'd actually laughed. He looked at her profile again on his phone. Green coat. Face turned away, laughing. Something nagged at him. Some low, peripheral sense of familiarity he couldn't locate. He put his phone down. The door opened at 7:03. Cold air came in first. Then a figure in a dark coat, snow on the shoulders and in the hair, reaching up to unwrap a scarf from around her face, stamping her boots on the mat just inside the door the way you do when you're trying not to track snow everywhere. Ethan watched. She got the scarf loose. She pulled it away, and the world went very, very still. He knew her face the way he knew the layout of his own house in the dark. Ava Sinclair, he still thought of her by that name, even though she'd been Ava Reynolds since her marriage. And then, after the divorce, just Ava, somewhere undefined, 35 years old, dark hair, longer than he remembered, the same careful way of holding herself, like she was perpetually braced for something. Lily's best friend since the 7th grade. The woman who had stood on Lily's side of the altar at their wedding, who had shown up at the hospital without being called and stayed until 4 in the morning, who had organized the meal train and managed the flowers, and quietly done 100 things that nobody asked, and that Ethan had only understood the weight of afterward. The woman who had been part of their life so completely that for a while, maybe a year, maybe longer, Ethan hadn't been able to look at a photo of Lily without seeing Ava somewhere in the frame, off to the side, laughing, and then she'd stopped coming around. Gradually at first, then completely. 18 months ago, maybe a little more. He'd understood. He'd felt something similar every time he saw her. He saw Lily seeing her. And the grief came in at an angle he wasn't built to withstand. He assumed she felt the same. He'd let it happen. He told himself it was the right thing. She was standing in the doorway of this cafe in Lincoln Square with snow in her hair, and she was looking at him. He watched her recognize him. It happened in pieces. The polite scan of the room. The brief pause on a man sitting alone at a corner table. The starting to form a smile of greeting. And then the freeze. The absolute, cellular-level stop of a person whose brain has just sent an emergency signal that says wait. He saw her mouth open slightly. He saw her close it. Neither of them moved. The couple near the door laughed at something. The string lights stayed on. Snow went on falling outside the fogged window. Everything else continued, indifferent. Ethan stood up. He wasn't sure why. It felt like the wrong thing to do, and also the only thing to do. Ava walked toward him, not because she'd decided to. It looked more like she was following some older instruction. Something written before the situation existed. She stopped at his table. He noticed her hands were shaking very slightly. He noticed his were too. "Hi," she said. It was the most inadequate word he'd ever heard. "Hi," he said. They sat down. The waiter came. They both ordered things they didn't pay attention to ordering. When he left, there was a silence that took up all the space in the room. Ethan spoke first. "You're Aria. And you're E." She looked at him. "The photo. You didn't have a beard in that photo. It was from a few years ago." He ran a hand over his jaw. "I grew it after. I know." Then, quietly, "I know. When you grew it." He didn't have to ask why she knew. They both knew when. "I used a photo from an angle," she said. "I thought I don't know what I thought. That I looked enough like myself, that someone would recognize me if they knew me. But that strangers wouldn't be able to find my profile." She paused. "That's not entirely rational." "No," he said. "But I understand it." She looked at the table. Her coffee sat there, untouched. "I've been back for 2 months. I didn't know." "I know you didn't." "I didn't." She stopped. Tried again. "I wanted to reach out. I picked up my phone probably 6 or 7 times. So did I." He hadn't admitted this to himself until exactly this moment. But it was true. He'd thought about calling her, not often, but genuinely the kind of thought you carry at the edge of your awareness. I should call Ava. Ava would understand this, and then the weight of everything that would come with that call, and the quiet decision not to make it. She wrapped her hands around her mug. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah." "Do you want to leave?" He considered the question. Really considered it, not reflexively, not politely. The honest answer came up slowly, from somewhere he hadn't been checking lately. "No," he said. She exhaled. "Me neither." Is that he stopped. "I don't know what it is," she said. "I genuinely don't know." The waiter came back with a small plate of shortbread that neither of them had ordered. He set it down with a smile and left. It was such a normal, small gesture that Ethan almost laughed. He didn't, but almost, Ava noticed. The corner of her mouth shifted slightly. "He must have sensed we needed something to do with our hands. He's very perceptive. He's very kind." She picked up one of the shortbread pieces and held it, not eating it. "I hated New York," she said. "I want you to know that. Everyone acts like New York saves you. It doesn't. It just keeps you too busy to think. I thought being busy was the point. It is. And then it isn't." She set the shortbread down. "I came back because I ran out of ways to be somewhere else." They stayed. An hour passed, then most of another, and neither of them tried to leave. The cafe thinned out around them. The couple by the door paid their bill and went. The two women by the wall gathered their coats, and the waiter seemed to understand implicitly that this corner table needed to be left alone. Outside, the snow kept falling. The window beside them was completely fogged now. Ethan had stopped noticing it. Ava told him about New York, in the way that people talk about a place they've survived. She'd taken a position with an architecture firm within 6 weeks of leaving Chicago, sublet an apartment in Brooklyn, learned the subway, buried herself in work that demanded 60 hours a week, and rewarded her for giving 70. She'd designed 3 projects that got published in trade magazines. She'd been offered a partnership track. "You didn't take it?" Ethan said. "I took it long enough to know I didn't want it." She looked at him. "I was good at the work. I just wasn't. I wasn't building anything that mattered to me anymore. Everything I made felt like it was for someone else's city. Chicago is your city. Lily is my city," she said, and then stopped. The word sat between them. He didn't look away. "Yeah, I don't know how to talk about her," Ava said quietly. "With most people I just don't. It's easier. They don't know how to receive it, and I don't know how to deliver it. And everyone ends up doing this performance of sadness that's exhausting." She paused. "With you, it's different. And also worse. Worse because? Because you actually know. Everything I could say, you already lived." She rubbed the side of her thumb against the rim of her mug. "Do you remember the camping trip? The summer before Noah was born?" He remembered immediately. She brought 3 different books and read all of them. She brought a wine opener and forgot the wine. She made me drive back to the nearest town to get it. And you went. Ava smiled. It was the first full smile she'd given him. "You just got up and drove 40 minutes round trip and came back and didn't complain once. I complained the whole way, but not to her." He looked at the table. "No, not to her. She knew though. She always knew." Ava's voice was soft. "She told me afterward. She said, 'Ethan always does the thing, even when he doesn't want to. That's the thing I love most about him, and also the thing that makes me feel most guilty.'" He'd never heard that. He sat with it. "I have things like that," Ava said, "things she told me that you don't know. And you probably have things she said to you that I don't know, and neither of us will ever get to ask her." She paused. "Sometimes I think the worst part of losing someone is losing access to all the versions of them you never got to meet." Ethan was quiet for a moment. When Noah was about 6, he drew her a picture. In his room. He told me he was drawing it to show her in his dreams. He hadn't told anyone that. It had lived in him unspoken for 2 years. He still draws them. He puts them in a shoebox. Ava pressed her lips together. Her eyes were bright. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be." She shook her head once. "Please don't be." The cafe was nearly empty now. The string lights at the counter were the main source of light. Someone in the back was playing music too quietly to identify just the shape of a melody. Barely there, Ethan thought. "I have not talked about any of this with anyone. Not like this." His grief counselor had been competent and careful. Dr. Voss, a measured woman with an office full of neutral-colored furniture, had given him tools. Language, frameworks. He was grateful for them the way you're grateful for a map in a foreign country useful, but the map was never the place. His colleagues had been well-meaning and helpless. Walt had once tried to tell him that time is the thing. Man, time just does it. And Ethan had nodded and thought. You have never lost the person you organized your whole life around. His in-laws carried their own grief, and he'd been careful not to add to it. He'd been so careful, for so long, about not adding to anyone's weight. He'd gotten very efficient at grieving alone. And here he was, in a cafe in a snowstorm, adding weight. And the strange thing, the thing he hadn't expected and didn't know how to categorize, was that it felt like putting something down instead. Like the weight was real and the weight was his, and the weight wasn't going anywhere. But for 2 hours, he hadn't been carrying it entirely by himself. And the difference between carrying something alone and carrying it alongside someone who knows its exact shape, that difference turned out to be enormous. He noticed that he was leaning forward. He noticed that she was too. The distance across the table was less than it had been an hour ago. He noticed that, and then he sat back slightly. She noticed him noticing. A small acknowledgement passed between them, wordless. This is complicated. Yes. We both know it. Yes. And we're still here. The waiter came quietly and refilled the water glasses without being asked. They both thanked him. It gave them somewhere to look that wasn't each other. I dated someone in New York, Ava said. For about a year. His name was Patrick. He was a good person. She said it carefully. Careful, like he was building something. Patient. He would have been good to me if I'd let him. You didn't let him. I couldn't. She looked at the water glass. Every time things got quiet, the good quiet. Not the anxious quiet, I felt like I was betraying something. Like the peace itself was the problem. A pause. I broke up with him on a Thursday and felt relieved, and then felt terrible about feeling relieved. Ethan understood this in his body, not just his mind. You weren't ready. I might not be ready now, she said. I don't know if I'm built for this anymore. You're here. We're both here. She looked at him. We were trying to be ready enough. And then, this happened. He exhaled, slow. I kept thinking, he said, that starting over meant replacing something. Like there's a fixed amount of space, or love, or whatever the word is, and anything new would take from something that already existed. He paused. But I don't think that's actually how it works. I don't think it is either, she said. I just haven't figured out what the alternative is. He didn't have an answer. Neither of them did. Outside, the snow was still falling. They paid the bill separately, without discussion. Because neither of them had the fluency yet to do it otherwise. Outside, the cold landed hard. The street was quiet, late enough now that the traffic had thinned. Only the soft sound of a snowplow somewhere several blocks away. Their breath came out in pale clouds. They walked to where the street widened, where a parking lot opened up behind the cafe. Both of their cars were there, it turned out, on opposite ends. They stood at the midpoint between them without agreeing to. The snow was falling more slowly now, thick flakes, unhurried. The orange amber of the street lamp caught them and held them for a moment before they hit the ground. Ava had her hands in her coat pockets. She was looking at the snow rather than at him. This feels like she stopped. Like what? Like standing at the edge of something without knowing if the ice will hold. He looked at her profile. The snow in her hair. The careful stillness of her. Say the thing, he said. She turned to him. What? Whatever you're working up to saying, say it. She held his gaze for a moment. Then, I feel something. When I'm talking to you, and I don't know if it's real, or if it's just because we share the same grief, and the same absence, and grief can make you feel close to people in ways that aren't real, sustainable, she said. I don't know if what I feel is about you, or about what we both lost. He was quiet for a moment. The snow fell. I don't know either, he said. And I think that might be why it's terrifying. She nodded, looked back at the snow. I hate myself a little, she said quietly. For being here. For feeling anything. It's been 3 years and I still... She was your person too. She was my person, my oldest person. Her voice was controlled, carefully controlled, and I'm standing in a parking lot in the dark, thinking about how it felt to sit across from you for 2 hours, and I feel like I owe her some kind of I don't even know. An apology? An explanation? She wouldn't want one. I know she wouldn't. She said it quickly, like she'd thought about this before. But what I know, and what I feel, are 2 different things. He understood. He understood exactly. I was alive tonight, he said. He didn't plan to say it. It came up the way things came up when you stopped monitoring the exits. In that cafe, I was actually present. In my own life. I haven't felt that in a long time. He paused, and I don't know what to do with that. Ava turned to look at him again. There was something in her face that he recognized not from tonight, but from before. From 100 dinners and holidays and ordinary Sundays, when the four of them had been in the same room, and it had felt, simply, like enough. She had always had this quality of really looking at you. Lily had called it Ava's laser eye. It wasn't unkind. It was just thorough. "We should stop," she said, "seeing each other, before it gets harder." He didn't argue. Some part of him had already known she would say this. Some part of him had already agreed with it. "Yeah," he said, "I mean that." But she didn't move toward her car. "I know." He didn't move either. "This isn't." She exhaled. "I'm not trying to protect myself. I mean, I am. But I'm also trying to protect you. And Noah. And the Sinclairs. Because if we do this, and it doesn't, if we try and it breaks, there's so much that could—" "I know," he said again. Softer this time. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she said, "I'm glad you were the one who walked in tonight." He swallowed. "Me too." She turned toward her car. She walked across the lot without looking back. He watched her go, watched her get in, watched the headlights come on. Her car pulled out slowly, carefully, onto the snowy street. He stood there in the parking lot alone for a while, before he could make himself go to his own car. 2 weeks. Ethan went back to work. He cooked dinner. He helped Noah with a book report on penguins. He drove to the grocery store and stood in the cereal aisle for 4 minutes trying to remember why he was there. He was worse than he'd been before. Not heartbroken, he couldn't claim that they'd had one accidental coffee, but hollowed out, in a way that was different from before. The before hollowness had been familiar. He'd known its shape. This was something new. This was the specific absence of something you'd seen clearly, and then turned away from. He didn't contact her. He'd said he wouldn't. He didn't. On the 14th day, Noah came home from school, dropped his backpack at the door in the way that Ethan had asked him 400 times not to do, and sat at the kitchen table while Ethan was making soup. "Dad. Where's Aunt Ava?" Ethan's hand stopped stirring. He turned. Noah was looking at him with that steady, gray-green gaze, the one that came directly from Lily. She's around, bud. In the city. Is she coming over?" "Not right now." Noah considered this. "How come?" "She used to come over for dinner sometimes. That was a while ago." He turned back to the stove. "Before she moved. But she's back now, right? Marcus's mom said she saw her at the market." Ethan kept his face toward the soup. "Yeah, she's back. So she could come over. It's more complicated than that." "Why?" He didn't answer right away. He was thinking about how to explain complicated to a soon-to-be 9-year-old in a way that was true. Sometimes grown-ups don't see each other for a while, and it makes it harder to start again, he said finally. Noah was quiet for a moment. "I miss her," he said. Ethan closed his eyes for 1 second. Just one. He'd been thinking about this in terms of himself and Ava. Grief between adults. Feelings between adults. An impossible situation between two adults who were old enough to understand exactly why it was impossible. He had not thought about this. That his 8-year-old son had also lost Ava. Not the way he'd lost Lily. Nothing could be that, but quietly. In the way children lose the constant people, the ones who'd been there and then weren't. Noah had known Ava his whole life. She'd babysat him. She'd taught him how to fold a paper airplane that actually flew. She'd been the one who showed up the week after Lily's funeral with dinner and a bag of small toys, and had sat on the living room floor with a 4-year-old Noah for 3 hours so that Ethan could sleep. And then she'd been gone. "I know," Ethan said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "I miss her too." Noah looked at him. "Then why can't she come over?" He turned the stove off. He went to the table and sat across from his son. He looked at that face, Lily's eyes, his own jaw. A combination of things that would never stop meaning everything to him. "I'm working on it," he said. Noah seemed to accept this. He reached across the table and pulled the pen from beside Ethan's crossword puzzle and started drawing on the back of an envelope. His default activity in quiet moments, drawing. Always drawing. Ethan watched him and thought, "You are the bravest thing I have ever been part of." He picked up his phone. He opened the conversation with Ava and looked at the last message, hers, 3 weeks ago. "Take care of yourself, Ethan." He typed, "We made a mistake. Not the cafe. The parking lot. The decision after." He held the phone for a moment. He sent it. She answered in 20 minutes. "I've been wanting to say that for 2 weeks." He typed back, "Why didn't you?" "Same reason you didn't. I was trying to be careful. I'm tired of being careful." A pause. Then, "Me too." They met at Wells Park the next morning. Saturday. Noah was with the Sinclairs. The park was mostly empty, a few dogs, a man in a bright orange jacket walking at a determined pace, 2 small children insisting on a snow-covered slide. Ava was already there when he arrived, standing near the fountain that wasn't running, her hands in her pockets, watching the children argue about whose turn it was. He walked up beside her. They stood together for a moment, watching. "The one in the red hat is going to win," she said. "She has the posture of someone who wins. The other one has longer arms, could go either way. The one in the red hat won." They started walking. The snow was packed down on the path, safe underfoot. Their breath came out in small clouds. "I owe you an honest conversation," Ethan said. "You owe me nothing. I want to have it anyway." He kept his eyes on the path ahead. "I've been treating this whole thing like a problem to be managed. Like there's a correct solution, if I think about it carefully enough." He paused. "And I think that's wrong. I think some things you just have to walk toward." She was quiet. "I'm not saying I have this figured out," he said. I don't know what this is. I don't know what it could be. I know that talking to you in that cafe was the first time in 3 years I felt like a person again, not just a role. And I know that the guilt is real, and the grief is real, and this is the most complicated situation I can imagine." He paused. "And I still want to try." She stopped walking. He stopped a step ahead and turned back. Her face was very still, not frozen still, the way water is still sometimes. "I loved her first," she said. "I know. Whatever this is, if it becomes anything, she comes with it. Her pictures stay on your walls. Her name gets said in your house. Noah knows who his mother was, and knows that she was my best friend. That was never in question. I need to say it," she said, "out loud, to you, so that we both know what we're agreeing to." He met her eyes. "She comes with it. She's already there. She'll always already be there." Ava's expression shifted. Something gave way in it carefully, in a small, controlled way, like a door being opened rather than broken. "I'm scared," she said. "Me too. This could go very badly. It could." He held her gaze. "Or it could go differently." She looked at him for a long moment. The park was quiet around them. 2 crows landed in the snow nearby, and pecked at something, and flew away. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Okay." A pause. "Don't make me say it again." He didn't. They walked for another hour without touching, which was right. This was not a moment for dramatic gestures. It was a moment for walking in the cold with someone, and feeling, for the first time in a long time, like the cold was a shared thing rather than a solitary one. The Sunday after, Ava came for dinner. Ethan had not told Noah in advance. He wasn't sure why, maybe, because he wasn't certain she'd come until her car pulled into the driveway, maybe because he didn't want to build it up into something large when he didn't know yet what it would be. He heard the doorbell. He heard Noah's feet on the stairs, the child's universal thunder. He heard the front door open. He heard, from the kitchen, nothing for about 4 seconds, and then, a sound he hadn't heard Noah make in a very long time, a kind of startled delight, half gasp, half small laugh, the sound of a child encountering something that exceeded whatever they'd expected. He came to the hallway. Noah had his arms around Ava's waist. She was crouched down to his level, coat still on, snow still on her shoulders, holding him in both arms with her eyes closed. Ethan stood in the hallway and felt his chest do something it hadn't done in 3 years, 2 months, and however many days. He went back to the kitchen. He stood at the counter and gripped the edge of it and breathed, carefully, in and out. He thought about Patricia's words, she would have wanted this. He thought about Noah in the parking lot outside the grief counselor's office, aged 5, pointing at a dog and saying that dog has a happy walk. Dad with the complete authority of someone who had identified the essential thing. He thought about the shoebox of drawings in Noah's closet, each one a letter to somewhere. His son had never stopped reaching toward her. He hadn't either, not really. He'd just forgotten that reaching was allowed. By the time they came in, Noah talking rapidly about the penguin book report and whether emperor penguins were actually the best penguins or whether king penguins were being underrated, he was fine. He was completely, entirely fine. He just needed a minute. Gerald and Patricia Sinclair came to dinner 6 weeks later. Ethan had told them before. Not everything, not the cafe, not the app, not the accidental meeting, but enough. He'd called Gerald on a Tuesday and said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it before you respond." And Gerald, who was a retired civil engineer and a man of few unnecessary words, had said, "Go ahead, son." He'd told them all of it. There was a silence. Then Patricia, "I see. Not warm, not cold." "I see." He'd given them time. 2 weeks of it. Patricia called on a Sunday, their usual call, and didn't mention it. Gerald had called on a Wednesday, which was unusual, just to check in about Noah's school project. He didn't mention it either. And then the dinner invitation. Ethan's kitchen. Gerald's request. "Make that lamb thing you used to make." Lily liked it. He made the lamb. The evening was careful. In the way evenings are careful, when people are navigating around something large without looking at it directly. Patricia asked Ava about her work. Ava asked about Gerald's garden, which was his primary topic of interest from April through October, and which he was entirely willing to discuss in February in theoretical terms. Noah dominated long stretches of conversation by explaining, at length, why penguins were superior to most other animals. After dinner, while Ethan was washing up, he heard Ava and Patricia at the kitchen table. He wasn't trying to listen. But the kitchen was small. Patricia said, quietly, a pause. Ava's voice. "She was my whole person." "I know." Patricia's voice was gentle in a way Ethan hadn't heard from her in a long time. "I know she was." He kept washing the dishes. "I'm not here to replace anything," Ava said. "I couldn't. I wouldn't try. I know that too." Another pause. She would have wanted. She was very clear-eyed about what she wanted for the people she loved. She was always like that. From when she was young, Patricia's voice was steady but thin, the way voices get when emotion is being held just barely at bay. She told me once, when she was sick, he stopped washing. She knew? Ava's voice was very quiet. Not that it would happen, just that her heart wasn't. She knew it wasn't typical. She didn't want us to be afraid, but she wanted us to know. Patricia paused. She said, "If anything ever happens to me, Ethan's going to need someone who knew me. Not to talk about me all the time. Just someone who knew." Ethan set down the dish he was holding, placed it carefully on the counter. He stood there, hands dripping, looking at the wall. "She didn't say my name," Patricia said quietly, "but she didn't need to." They went to the cemetery on the second Saturday in May, on what would have been Lily's 38th birthday. Ethan and Ava and Noah. Noah had insisted on bringing flowers. He'd chosen them himself at the market, yellow ones, because Mom's favorite was yellow, and everyone forgets that. He carried them carefully in both hands the whole way, serious about it. They stood at the headstone. The grass was new and green around it. The maple tree nearby was just starting to leaf out. Noah set the flowers down. He stood there for a moment, looking at the stone with the focused attention of a child who is doing something important and knows it. Then he said to the headstone, "Hi, Mom. I got an A on my penguin report. Dad helped, but I mostly did it." A pause. "Aunt Ava is here. We've been having dinner together. She taught me how to make crepes. They're not as good as yours, but they're pretty good." He looked up at Ethan. "Is that okay to say?" "Yeah, bud." Ethan's voice held. "Barely." "That's exactly okay to say." They stood there a while longer. No grand speeches. Just 3 people and a headstone and the May light filtering through the maple. Eventually, Noah decided he was hungry and that this was an appropriate moment to mention it. This broke the solemnity in the best possible way. They went to a diner nearby and ordered too much food, and Noah ate half of everyone's plates and fell asleep in the car on the way home. He proposed in August. He hadn't planned it for August. He hadn't planned any particular month. He just found himself, one evening, at the end of a day that had been ordinary in the way good days are ordinary. Noah at soccer practice, Ava reading at the kitchen table while Ethan made pasta, the whole apartment warm from the oven, a record playing in the background that nobody had deliberately chosen. And he thought, this is already the thing. This is already it. He'd been so focused on the question of when and how and whether that he'd missed, somehow, that it had already happened. The answer had already happened. He was already living inside it. He got the ring 2 weeks later. He didn't buy a flashy one. He found a jeweler in Wicker Park who worked with vintage stones, a small woman named Claire, who asked him 3 careful questions about the person he was buying for, and then took him directly to a case in the back without consulting anything. He chose something simple, a small, clear diamond in a gold setting that was unpretentious and would last forever. The kind of thing that didn't need to announce itself. Claire wrapped it in dark tissue paper and handed it to him and said, "She sounds like someone who will know immediately that this is right." He didn't explain how she could possibly know that. He suspected she'd seen enough people buy rings to know. He took Ava to the lakefront on an evening when the sky was doing something exceptional, that particular Lake Michigan sunset that comes in late August, when the light is orange and horizontal, and the water goes dark and gold at the same time. They'd been walking for about 20 minutes, talking about nothing consequential, a contractor she was managing, the fact that Noah had declared his new favorite food to be specifically the kind of noodles that are flat when he stopped. She walked a step ahead, and then noticed he'd stopped and turned back. He'd thought about what to say for 3 weeks. In the end, what came out was, "I don't want to pretend that simple is the right word for this. It isn't. But you are the truest thing that has happened to me in a very long time, and I would like, if you're willing, to try to deserve that." She said yes. She said it immediately, without ceremony, and then laughed at herself for how immediately she said it. He laughed, too. They stood at the lake in the August light, and held on to each other, and the light just kept doing its extraordinary thing around them, the way nature does, entirely indifferent to, and somehow perfectly suited to the moment. They were married in December. Small wedding. The Sinclairs. Walt Fredericks and his wife, a warm woman named Diane who had brought Ethan lasagna twice in the first year, and never made him thank her for it. A few people from Ava's firm, Dennis Hargrove, who cried in the front row, and denied it afterward, with the conviction of a man who believed he could rewrite recent history through sheer confidence. 2 of Ava's cousins who had driven in from Ohio and spent the reception being aggressively delighted by everything. Noah in a suit he wore with the confidence of someone who'd been waiting his whole life to wear a suit, which, as far as Ethan could tell, he had been. He was the one who brought the rings to the altar. He walked up with great ceremony, holding the small pillow with both hands, and placed it carefully in front of the officiant. Then he looked at Ava with an expression of deep, uncomplicated satisfaction and went back to his seat. There were 2 photographs on the table at the reception. One was from Ethan and Lily's wedding. Lily in her dress, laughing at something off camera. Ava just visible at the edge of the frame. She hadn't known that photograph had caught her. The other was taken 3 months ago, in Gerald's garden. Ethan, and Ava, and Noah. All 3 squinting against the sun, Noah in the middle with his arms thrown sideways around both of them like he was trying to make sure nobody left. Ava saw the photographs when she arrived at the reception. She stood in front of them for a moment. Just stood there. Then she went to find Ethan and stood next to him and didn't say anything. He didn't say anything either. He took her hand and held it. And that was the whole thing. At the end of the night, after Noah had been collected by Gerald and Patricia, and the last guests had trickled out, Ethan and Ava sat alone at one of the tables in the emptied venue. Someone had left a half-finished piece of cake. They shared it with 1 fork because neither of them could find 2. "I want to tell you something," Ava said. He looked at her. "When I was in New York, At my worst, I used to think about Lily constantly. Every day. And I'd think, she would know what to do here. She would have the exact right thing to say. She looked down at the cake, but I'm starting to think she did know what to do. She just did it quietly, a long time ago. She introduced us. She let us be important to each other, and then she trusted us to figure out the rest. He was quiet for a moment. She would have been insufferable about being right, he said. Ava's laugh came out startled, real and unguarded, the best kind. Absolutely insufferable. She would have brought it up forever. I always knew, he said, doing a decent impression of Lily's declarative tone. I always knew you two would. You just both needed to catch up. Ava finished it. She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that has sadness folded into it without being defeated by it. She would have said exactly that. She absolutely would have. They sat in the empty room with the photographs, and the unfinished cake, and the memory of a person they had loved, who had, in whatever way she'd been able to, tried to make sure they'd be okay. Not every piece of grief had a resolution. Most of it didn't. Ethan knew this. Had learned it over 3 years in the bones of his quietest hours. You didn't arrive somewhere neat and finished. Grief didn't graduate you. You just moved slowly, imperfectly, sometimes well, and sometimes terribly, and the moving was the only part you controlled. But tonight, sitting across from this woman who had known Lily since the 7th grade, who had carried the same loss in a different shape, who had come back to the city and accidentally walked into a cafe on a snowy Saturday and changed the whole remaining trajectory of things, tonight felt like something solid under his feet. Not an ending. Not a beginning. Exactly. A continuation. Lily had loved them both. They would love each other. They would love Noah, this boy with his shoebox of drawings. His emperor penguins, his inherited gray-green eyes, and his complete certainty that the right people would find their way to each other if you gave them enough time, and that the three of them understood, in their different ways, was not a replacement. It was an expansion. Love doesn't replace love. It just finds more room.